Good morning, Minnesota DFLers, and welcome to the DFL Daily. Richard Karlbaum here, chair of the Minnesota Democratic Farmer Labor Party. We're here each and every day, Monday through Friday at 10:45 to make sure you have the message, the action, the tools to be empowered. Lots happening this week, so let's jump right into it. Today is a great day for DFL events throughout the state. We have a Working Families Picnic in Avon today. This is part of our Working Families Picnic program. Go to dfl.org/WFP. Connor or Brock, please drop that link in the chat. This is so that your unit can host a Working Families Picnic, and the DFL will provide some financial resources towards a successful picnic in your area. Also, the Chatfield Rural Rally for Democracy is happening today at 5 p.m. 6 p.m. in Maple Grove is the SD37 Book Club. There's a SD53 is hosting a van workshop at 6 p.m. That is the Voter Activation Network, not a minivan workshop, although there is a minivan connected to the van. Anyway, 6 p.m. West St. Paul. And then in 7 p.m. Burnsville, there's a door knocking 101 for precinct leaders. Really excited about folks making sure people have the tools and training to be successful. Lots happening this weekend. As I mentioned yesterday, it's Twin Cities Pride Weekend. It's the Hmong International Freedom Festival this weekend. It's Somali Week starts this weekend, and there's tabling all day, June 27th. That runs through July 5th. We'll drop a lot of these links right in the chat. Early voting starts on Friday. I will be voting right away, first thing in the morning. I'm excited to get out there and vote for Peggy Flanagan for U.S. Senate and Ilhan Omar for Congress, where I live. Wherever you live, whether it's the CD2, we got to get Matt Little through the primary, and there's other primary races throughout the state. So make sure that you vote on August 11th in the primary. First and foremost, early voting starts this Friday. We'll be doing a press conference as well Friday to highlight that in addition. So lots happening this weekend. Excited to see people out and about. Make sure that you get out, get involved, and bring someone new to the party. Quite literally, bring someone new to the party, whether it's the Hmong Freedom Festival, Somali Week, the Pride Festival, one of these parades that are happening throughout the state this weekend. It's really a moment to show up. All right. This week, we're expecting a slew of decisions from the conservative Supreme Court of the United States. As I mentioned on Monday, the end of their term is near next week, Tuesday, and they're going to be pushing out a lot of really, decisions that are going to have deep impact in various communities. One of those communities that we're monitoring very closely is the trans, non-binary, and two-spirit Minnesota community that have been under attack by Donald Trump's federal government, and sometimes Democrats shy away from protecting these folks because they think it's a political issue. It's not. It's about human beings. It's about human decency, and it's about showing up for your neighbor, which is what Minnesotans proved we can do at the start of this year during Operation Metro Surge. Same thing we have to do now. For the Minnesota DFL, let me be crystal clear. Trans Minnesotans are a core and valued part of the DFL community. As a trans refuge state, our state has a national role and responsibility to protect our trans neighbors. That means protecting gender-affirming care for trans patients and providers. Our state protections didn't happen by accident. It was a result of a lot of organizing in the queer spaces and queer communities, and the DFL elected officials responded in kind and made sure that we made sure that Minnesota was a trans refuge state. And we're immensely proud of the progress we've made on behalf of that community. So now we're looking at the Supreme Court and a case that could prevent or ban trans youth from playing sports. In 2020, Idaho passed a law that banned transgender women and girls from playing on girls and women's sports teams. The case made its way to the Supreme Court following a disagreement about whether the law is discriminatory against trans athletes. In Minnesota, our Attorney General Keith Ellison fought to protect kids in our state from bans like these. So today, I'm very excited to be joined on the call by Kat Rohn. Kat is the executive director of OutFront Minnesota, Minnesota's largest LGBTQ plus advocacy organization. Democracy means every person has the right to participate in their community. Kat, welcome to the call. Thank you for joining us today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Democracy means every person has a right to participate in their community, and the government cannot get in the way. Trans kids are at the center of this case. What would you say to Minnesotans about what this case means for participation, belonging, and freedom?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have seen a lot of litigation over trans athletes in particular, and I think because it touches on these really salient questions about what it means to have safety and fairness and inclusion for all sorts of folks. But I think what is often missed in those discussions is the fact that these folks aren't just looking at sort of realigning rules or talking about actual participation. They just want to push trans people out of these spaces writ large and to police how people's bodies and identities identities show up in all sorts of spaces. And I think, that's really at the bottom line what we're talking about when we talk about trans issues and LGBTQ issues in this country right now is like, who gets to make choices about how we live, how we make choices about our own bodies, and what our lives and futures are going to look like. Should it be the role of government, or should it be the role of people? Should we be expanding the vision of what our country means and who can be a part of it, and who can be a part of this democracy, or should we narrow it down and try and fit people into smaller boxes?
Absolutely, well said. Republicans have for a long time always talked about states' rights, but in this situation and in many other situations, they are trying to roll back the ability of states to make decisions about how people can show up in their own life and in their own community by making these sweeping decisions. What do you have to say to young people who are about to see this decision come down from the Supreme Court?
Yeah, one, I think it's really important to note that the Supreme Court can have a lot of impact on laws across the country. We don't know exactly how they're going to rule, but we know that it's going to have an impact both in states where there are bans and potentially in states like Minnesota where there are not bans on trans youth participation. But what they can't rule on is our inherent dignity as people. They can't rule on what the future is going to bring. So we can work to change the reality that the Supreme Court puts into place around this. We can work to navigate it. We can work to create a future where trans athletes will be able to play. And there are a lot of creative ways to ensuring participation, even in states that have bans. So, the biggest thing I would say to trans youth is like, hold on to hope and stay in community, because it's really important that we don't let the Supreme Court define our communities or this moment, even if the ruling comes down in a way that harms us or that goes against my values around participation in sports.
Kat, I'm going to just tell a personal story. In 2003, I was a legislative assistant in the state Senate, and Tim Pawlenty had just gotten elected. Michelle Bachmann was pushing a ban on same-sex marriage. It was her big issue when she served in the Senate back then. I was a junior in college. I just ended my football career after an injury, and I started the coming out process. And for me, every day at the state Senate, I saw this young state senator who just been elected named Scott Dibble, who was there every day doing the work of democracy, standing up for his community, advocating for transportation policy, which is one of his niche issues. And for me, as a young closeted gay man, it was really inspiring to see a leader in the community who is so proud and visible. I could literally talk to Scott Dibble as a human being, and I knew that there would be a place for me. You and I were at Lee Finke's fundraiser and campaign kickoff last Tuesday, and the same thing struck me. You and Lee Finke are a visible encouragement to so many young people in this state who need to look for hope, need to find hope, need to understand how they can show up in their own community. And so I just want to say, what is that like? What kind of pressure does it put on you? What does that mean to you to be that kind of visible presence so that others can have hope?
Yeah, I mean, I think visibility is exceptionally important. I think sometimes it's trivialized as just sort of this thing like, oh, yeah, people know trans people. But I think especially for our youth, like having visible representation of trans futures is really important to people. And I think having more than just one person, I think oftentimes communities are reduced down to like one sort of trivialized icon. And I'm really proud of the fact that here in Minnesota, we have, Representative Lee Finke, we've got Representative Leash Kozlowski, Representative Breon Curran, who are all members of the sort of like informal trans caucus here in the state. We have leaders like myself and Andy Otto at Twin Cities Pride. We have elected folks in Congress like Sarah McBride. We have trans people like Chase Strangio from the ACLU arguing trans cases in front of the Supreme Court. So we are agents in our own decisions, and we are visible icons for people in community to look up to and see themselves as having agency, power, influence, and a future. And those are exceptionally important things to building a community and to building our power within systems that don't always see us and haven't always seen us. That hasn't been the case. 10 years ago, we didn't have any of these folks in these positions. And here we are today in a very different world, building a foundation for a very different world that will be here 10 years from now.
That's just something incredible. During this Pride Month and during this Pride Week, Twin Cities Pride Week, Kat, thank you so much for your leadership, your visibility. You're willing to lean in and do the work on behalf of all communities. that are impacted and your steadfast effort to make sure that the trans community is recognized, validated, and respected, that they can just simply live their life in these spaces. And in Minnesota, I'm damn proud that we are a state that proactively does work to protect the trans community. Thanks for being here today. What gives you hope in this moment?
The biggest thing that gives me hope is actually trans youth themselves. I've watched trans youth play sports. I've watched trans youth show up in community for one another. I've watched trans youth and their families like find these moments of joy amidst all of this. And I think there's actually something deeply hopeful about queer and trans youth coming out in this particular climate, because it is a like promise to themselves in their future to say that I am not just going to live in fear. I am going to be myself even when it feels challenging, even when the world feels like it's against me. And it is a belief in the possibility of change. I believe that trans people are an embodiment of hope and future thinking because we are choosing a different path than we were given. We are leaning into that and saying we are going to choose to be our full selves, to not compromise on who we are, to not have to hide that away, but to live into a world that may not fully see us yet, but that we can believe we can change into. And I think, it is a deeply hopeful act, particularly to see kids coming out and supporting one another and to see their families supporting them on that journey, because it is a belief in a better future.
Well said. Thank you so much for being our special guest today, Kat Rohn, Executive Director of OutFront Minnesota. Really appreciate you. Happy Pride weekend, and I'll see you around, I'm sure, at the parade and at the park this weekend.
Yeah, happy Pride.
Awesome. Thank you to Kat Rome for joining us. It's so important to be in lockstep with our allies in this moment. It's also crucial that to make sure our trans neighbors know they are not politically expendable. They're essential to our fight for working people. So for today's action, give Outfront Minnesota a follow on social media. We're going to drop their Blue Sky Instagram and Facebook links into the chat so that you can follow them and learn more about the organization that has been defending LGBTQ plus Minnesotans for so long in this state. All right, we've got 132 days until the November 3rd midterm election. We are working together to build this massive coalition throughout the state to ensure we deliver the largest electoral defeat of a sitting president in the history of Minnesota midterms. Let's go vote, early vote in the August 11th primary starting this Friday for Peggy Flanagan, Matt Little, Ilhan Omar, and others. And let's go win this thing. Thanks, everybody.